David, for a lot of people of faith, they ask and have heard the question that science and faith are contradictory. What would you say to that?
I disagree, but let me say why I think that that's a wrong view of science and faith, and it is widespread within Western culture, that science and faith are in conflict. This is called the conflict model, as some academics put it. And I think it stems from three mistakes. The first is a misreading and oversimplification of history. If you go back into the 19th century, the conflict model was created. So it's only over 100 years old.
Wow.
And it was created by one of Darwin's friends, Thomas Henry Huxley, Darwin's bulldog, as he was called. And Huxley, with 6 or 7 of his scientific friends, founded a secret society. It was a London dining club called the X Club. And they had a problem. Their problem was that science in the UK at the late 19th century was dominated by the Church of England.
Sure.
So, for example, in my own university, the first professor of astronomy, appointed in 1842, had to be an ordained Anglican clergyman in order to fulfill the post.
That shrinks the population.
That's right. To be president of the British Association of Science, it helps a great deal if you're a bishop in the 19th century.
Okay.
What Huxley and his friends thought was that as science was growing, they needed to free science from the political power of the church, to give science its own political control. And so one of the ways that they devised as a strategy was the conflict model, because the conflict model eases science and Christian faith apart, and indeed pushes them apart by conflict. And so what a number then began to do was to rewrite histories under a narrative of warfare or battle. The Warfare of Science with Christendom was one of the titles written at the end of the 19th century.
Wow.
And there Galileo became a battle between the church and science. Darwin became a battle between Genesis and science. In fact, those stories are mythical as being simple conflicts.
I was going to ask you if they are actual conflicts that happened, but obviously not.
Well, they had elements of conflicts to them, but they were far more interesting than that. So we may come back to that, but that's the first point, the sense of the conflict model being a myth rather than truth of history.
Sure.
The second thing is that people make the mistake of thinking that science and Christianity describe the world in exactly similar ways, and if they sound different, then one has to be right and one has to be wrong. Indeed, someone like Professor Dawkins will say, once I've got a scientific description of something, that's all I need. It seems to me that that's just a bit too simplistic. Let's use an old illustration. What is a kiss? Well, a kiss is the approach of 2 pairs of lips, the reciprocal transmission of carbon dioxide and microbes, the juxtaposition of 2 orbicular muscles in a state of contraction. That's a kiss in scientific terms. If I go to my wife and say to her, Alison, let me get together with you for a mutual transmission of carbon dioxide and microbes. Let me juxtapose my orbicular muscle in a state of contraction with yours. She would say,
romantic.
Get lost. You see, in that context, a kiss is described in terms of meaning, value, purpose, love. If I then say, what's the true definition of a kiss? Is it the one about carbon dioxide? Or is it the one about meaning, purpose, value? Which is true? Actually, both are true, but different. And to fully understand a kiss, I need both.
Yes.
So science may describe certain things in the world in one way. Christian theology may talk about meaning, value, and purpose, particularly, say, when we come to the origin of the universe. You don't have to choose one or the other. Seems to me that they could be complementary. And the third reason that you get this conflict model is people believing that when science and Christian theology explore the world, they do so in completely different ways. And this is this old thing where people say science is about fact, but Christianity is about faith. But in using that word faith, they often think that faith is believing things you know aren't true. And so you set up this opposition. Now, faith is basically trust on the basis of evidence.
Yeah.
We do that all the time in science.
Sure.
When I work on the Big Bang model of the origin of the universe, I never have the full story. I have to look at evidence, and then I have to build a model out of that. Science itself involves trust on the basis of evidence. It involves faith.
Yeah.
Christianity, for me, involves facts. What Francis Schaeffer, a great philosopher, once called brute facts. Supremely for Christianity, it's in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. The historical evidence that God has walked the space-time history of this universe in a human being, Jesus. And therefore, when it comes to Christian theology, of course, there are a whole number of things going on. And those facts, those events have to be interpreted. And so it's not proving God, but we don't prove big science these days. In science, when you talk about the Big Bang, you never talk about proof. That's a word that we talk about evidence leading to the best interpretation or model.
Yeah.
And so in this way, science and Christian theology have a lot in common in exploring the world. Of course, the one thing which is different about theology and science is that science says that I'm exploring the impersonal mathematical reality at the heart of the universe. Christianity says that behind that mathematical model is a personal God who wants to be in relationship.
Yeah.
And science has a limit when it comes to knowing everything. If I might say, or ask the question as a scientist, how do I know that my wife loves me? Well, I could look for evidence.
Yeah.
Does she buy me an anniversary card on our wedding anniversary? Does she run screaming out of the room every time she sees me? Those things would give me some evidence about whether she loved me or not. But ultimately, in personal relationships, I only get to know love if I'm prepared to risk myself into a relationship of love. So Christianity goes beyond science in this sense to say that there is an invitation into a personal relationship with the God who I see in Jesus, which is unparalleled in science.
Sure.